Hello, welcome to the Courageous Self-Care podcast. I'm your host, Christina Marlette. On this show, we get into self-care that you might not have considered to be self-care prior to now. We kind of sometimes are fed by the media that self-care is things that you do for yourself, like getting a massage, going to the spa, having cucumbers on your eyes, and even exercise, nutrition, and that kind of stuff. And while those are all super important, and I love doing all of those things, if that's the only self-care we focus on, we're going to feel like an empty shell because those are all focusing on the body. There's so much more to us than our physical body. And that's why courageous self-care also has to do a lot with going to the inside where it is uncomfortable and we confront things about ourselves that we might not want to explore. But the way that we do it in courageous self-care is actually fun. It can be light and playful and enjoyable. And yeah, we might cry sometimes, but that's okay too. So for this kind of self-care, it's important to have a guide. Because as I learned going through my 10 plus years of intensive personal development courses, traveling all over North America and spending lots of money and time and energy learning about how to find the best version of myself, I didn't know any of those things until I went outside of myself. So we do need a guide. We just don't know what we don't know. So voila, here I am. And I love to get other guides on the show because although my ego would like to think that I know everything, I certainly don't. And so today I have with me another guide, the lovely and talented Amy van Meijl. Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Hi there. Thank you so much.
So glad to have you here. Today we are connecting Calgary to Calgary. So we are both from Calgary. That doesn't happen very often anymore, but I'm so glad to have you on the show, Amy.
I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. So tell us a little bit, Amy, about what you're up to and what lights you up, who you are. It's a big question. Go for it.
All right. It's a big question. So I'm trained as an interior designer, which is what I've been doing in Calgary for the last 5 years. And I've just started launching a new business that is focused on helping other service-based entrepreneurs who want to be entrepreneurs actually start and grow a profitable business. So that is my passion project of the moment. It's been an enormous challenge and really exciting. So that's sort of the business and my day-to-day work things. And then things that I'm really super passionate about. So as we mentioned before the interview, so those of you who are just tuning in won't have heard our conversation before, but I'm originally a girl from Manitoba and I moved to Calgary 5 years ago to be with my guy. And I love being in the mountains. The mountains is it is my heaven on earth. It's my favorite place to be. And so in the wintertime, we're skiing all the time. And I actually, this week, I've been really noticing that I keep seeing the mountains in the distance and I feel this pull, I need to get back out there. I need to go see the mountains. So things like that I love being in the mountains, being connected to nature. And and then just connecting with people, having really good conversations, right? Not just the fluffy, how are you doing, but actually getting into the grit of it. So.
Ooh, yeah. I'm covered in goosebumps because I am totally aligned with what you're saying. I love the mountains. I love deep conversations that mean something, that go beyond the weather and the superficial, I'm fine.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I wanted to know about interior design is what you love about it.
So what I really love about interior design, and in particular the way that I have chosen to practice interior design, is it comes to the connection to the people. So my favorite thing when I work on a project is finding out what drives this person, what they're excited about, what they might be missing in their home. So I know we're here to talk about self-care, and self-care is more than bubble baths, but what I see often is that people's homes aren't lined up to support them to rest and to relax and to grow in themselves. So one of my great joys is to be able to work with people to bring the physical space into alignment with what they actually want. And it sounds a bit out there, but it's so fun and I really love doing it. And then my second favorite is seeing how their face lights up when the space is done. And they're just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, it's way better than I could have ever imagined. And so, yeah, but for me, design is all about the person. And so I've had potential clients ask me in the past, what kind of style do you work in, et cetera. And there are some styles that I'm just not very well versed in. They're not something that I really like to do. But for me, it's always been about the homeowner. It's always been about, what excites them and what lights them up and what do they need? What do they need to be supported? So, yeah.
Well, that didn't sound out there at all. Like, your space is a direct reflection of what's going on the inside. And I learned that the first time by having a feng shui consultant he lived in California. So I did a video of the house we were living in at the time, and the upstairs was gorgeous, like definitely okay for guests to come over, all of our art collection, amazing. And then we went down to the basement. I said, I'm really embarrassed to show you this part. And he said, well, yeah, that's interesting because your basement and your closet space and the trunk of your car are all indications of what is going on in your subconscious. So let's get to work on that basement situation.
There you go. Very cool. I know so many clients, the first time I come over, they're like, please, I'm so sorry the house is such a mess. Please don't look at the mess. And I always say, I don't see the mess. I just see the potential.
Nice. Perfect. And of course, that reveal moment, that's why we tune into all these makeover reality shows, right? Because that reveal moment is just so magical and you get to experience as part of your job. So awesome.
Yeah. I love it.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks for sharing that. So we're going to move into part 2 of the interview, which is getting you to share a current favorite self-care practice. And one of the reasons I love to do this is, well, first of all, I find it's a great way to get to know people and find out about what they value. And these days I've been thinking a lot about elevated conversations, kind of like what we were talking about before. If you can ask really good questions, not just how are you, or let's get into complaining about how busy our lives are, but ask questions like, what do you do for self-care? Or what's something you've done that's courageous, which we're going to get into later. These are examples of questions that are really going to help you connect with other people. And it is weird to ask them. I know that for sure. I have had uncomfortable moments where I've gone beyond the standard conversation in groups of new people. And I've said, I want to know more about you. So I'm going to ask a really weird question. And then the ensuing conversation is amazing. So that's one of the reasons I like to ask these interesting questions, because we get to know more about you. So Amy, having said that, what is something you love to do for self-care?
So I love this question, and I was thinking a lot about it before. So my current self-care practice is, so I look at it as my morning, I'll call it a routine for lack of a better word.
Ritual. Ritual is a beautiful word.
I grew up Catholic, so ritual to me feels like, that's a bit heavy. So in the morning, I'm beyond the, getting up, having breakfast, what have you, I make sure that I give myself time to meditate. And I've reframed how I look at both the time that I give myself and the words I put around it. So I used to say that I take time to meditate. And that always felt like I'm pulling away from something, like it's creating a lack, or creating a vacuum of space. And now I look at it as I give myself the time and the opportunity to do this, because to me that comes from wealth. That comes from, having abundance, having a lot of. Now the interesting thing around this, it's the most important, I would say the most important part of any self-care that I do in my day is to give myself time and opportunity to take, to sit there and to be in meditation. And sometimes that's 5 minutes and sometimes that's like an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And why it's been so important to me to give that to myself, and what's been interesting is that I felt really guilty for a long time about doing that, because I would watch my guy head off to work in the morning and, feeling tired, and seeing him just sort of be like, okay, I'm not super excited about where I'm going, and feel guilty that I have created the opportunity to take care of myself in that way. So that's one of my my biggest things, is just to give myself space and grace to every morning connect with with myself, whatever that looks like. Some mornings, like, I'll be honest, there's some mornings I'm nodding off of my meditation.
Oh, for sure. That's a great way to meditate.
Yeah. Like, oh, what was that? Where was I again? And then there are mornings where I have just the most amazing, powerful experience. So that's my daily self-care is to be sure that I give myself that time. And then I always follow up my meditation with my cup of coffee. I have 1 cup of coffee a day. I look forward to it all afternoon, but I'm looking forward to the next morning's cup of coffee. And just, again, the same way that I create space to allow openness and to give myself that opportunity to meditate, I create space to give myself time with that cup of coffee. And it seems like, in some ways, like such a simple thing, but to me, it really fills me up. And then when I do that, when I have my meditation in the morning and then I enjoy my cup of coffee, then the whole rest of the day is set up fantastically. So really, no matter what happens the rest of the day, and not every day is awesome. Some days, I'm swearing by 3 in the afternoon. But then no matter what happens the rest of the day, I can go back and say, okay, you know what? It's okay. I've had this time. I've given myself the opportunity and space to do this. And it just makes all the rest of it easier in a way.
Mm-hmm.
That's my favorite self-care, like my daily self-care.
Nice. I love that. And I think it's so important that you pointed out that you have shifted the words around it. And that is a huge part of self-care, especially courageous self-care, is moving into different parts of your day with intention. Like, why are you doing this? Is there awareness around it? And the words we use are super important. We're always on this sliding scale of moving towards lack or moving towards abundance. And so much of our society is based on trying to get us to believe that we're in lack so that we buy more things and keep the economy going. However, it trickles into things that have nothing to do with that part of our world. So when we say that we don't have enough youth, or we don't have enough time, we don't have enough energy, shifting our words actually makes a huge difference and brings us more to the side of abundance. And you're right. It's exactly to do with how you're thinking about it. You're being intentional about your meditation. And I gather that you're not using a timer when you meditate. Is that true?
No. So I listen. It depends on what I am stepping into meditation for. And there are mornings that I don't just have, complete time freedom, that I could meditate for 3 hours if I wanted to, that I do have appointments and things. So I have audio tracks that are timed, and I the audio track as it gives me a clean white noise to eliminate the distractions around me. Now my home is fairly quiet, but there's sometimes landscapers and things outside. So the audio track, then I will, if I need to be within a specific amount of time, I'll choose a track that will be within that time. Mm-hmm. If I am going into a deep what I would call a divine meditation. So a divine mind conversation, something where I'm really going in with the intention of working through something or learning something, then I will find a track that, like typically a YouTube track that's hours long, but then I also know that I have nothing that's pressing that I have to come out of, because when I step into that kind of meditation, then I want to be sure that I can be 100% engaged. So I also don't do those kinds of meditations when I have an appointment coming up right away.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense. The last thing I want to comment about that you mentioned is the guilt and the different circumstances. I can totally relate to that because my husband is in the same circumstance, and I have carefully cultivated a life where I do have a lot of freedom. I can decide what I want to do, when I want to do. I used to be a teacher, so I know what his schedule is like. And he has told me, I'm jealous of what you do in a day. Sometimes I hear what you do and I just think, and so I could have let that guilt stop me and bring me down to what he's going through. But instead, I'm very aware that I have crafted this for myself. I'm where I'm at because of the choices that I've made, and I've taken a stand for myself. And it sounds like you have done that too. So you haven't shrunk to live at the same kind of lifestyle that he's currently in. You have also prioritized your own well-being, which is definitely part of courageous self-care. And it is not easy to do that. It takes a lot of courage to move beyond that guilt. Like, it's just an emotion giving you information. You don't have to succumb to shrinking yourself or making yourself be something that someone else wants you to be. So how did you deal with that?
That's a great question. So it's a very much a work in progress, and it's something that I think has really come to bear in the last few weeks very clearly for me. So really up until a few weeks ago, every morning, especially on the mornings that I would see him, that he's tired and he's not excited about his job, and he would, I'd send him off to work and say, have a great day, knowing full well that it's probably going to be a challenge of a day. Yet I get to truck into my office, which is like 3 feet from our front door, and I can just, cozy into my cocoon, do whatever I want to. The one thing that so the last several months that I've been consistently reminding myself of when I feel that coming in is that I am crafting the life that I want. And if I'm not happy with what's going on, it's because I've crafted it to be that way. So the responsibility is also mine. I either choose to stay in this like crappy place that I'm not enjoying things and I'm, things just aren't moving the way I want them to, or I make the choice to say, okay, I want something bigger, bolder, brighter. And if I want that, then it's also my responsibility to take ownership of that. And so that's what I would remind myself of those mornings that I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so guilty that I have this, that I just remind myself, I'm creating a life that I want. And if it's a really heavy guilt day, then I remind myself that where I'm going is such a big vision for my life and for the life that I will have with him, that if I can give myself the space and the time to continue moving forward, even though right now it feels really kind of crummy, then I know that I'm crafting a life that will eventually give him the opportunity to do whatever he wants to as well. And so on the days where it's really tough, that's what I remind myself of, that I'm not just doing this for myself, that it's not a selfish thing to take time, to give myself time and do this, but that ultimately my goal is so much bigger than just this moment in today. And it's important to give myself fully to that goal.
We are walking the same path, sister.
I love it. I know that like working from home, and both my parents are entrepreneurs. And I remember my mom years ago saying, people have a funny idea of people who work from home. Like, you're not really working, that it's, you don't have to go anywhere. It's no different. But the truth is, and we see this all the time, there's so many more people working from home, and it doesn't mean you're any less committed to what you do. And in fact, I would say there are times where we're more committed, because sometimes it takes a whole lot extra to, not look at what's happening in the house and not let the other things distract you and be like, no, I'm here. This is what I'm working on.
Yes.
And I just need to be here and commit to it. So, but I know that's a huge challenge for people who work from home to be able to solve that.
Yeah, you're setting a great example, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because I'm sure there are other women who are in the exact same situation, and it's good to talk about these things that usually don't come up. So thank you for sharing that and being authentic about it.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're going to pause for a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to get into Amy's story of courage, so do stick around. You're still here. Yay. Thanks for being with us. So, Amy, I love to get guests to share a story of courage, again, for these elevated conversations, to find out what's going on underneath the surface level, and also because courage is so important. And I think, like, before I started doing courageous self-care, I didn't really think of courage all that much. I would say when we did a cheers at the table, we learned in France to say bon courage. Not that I lived in France, that sounded very glamorous. But when my husband and I went cycling there before we had kids, people would say bon courage. And that would be the only time I really thought about courage. But it is so important. Courage is the difference between a mediocre life and a life that is lit up and fantastic and exciting. So I feel like when we hear more stories of courage, it gets us more in that vibe. It's fun to think about your story of courage. It reminds you that you're a courageous person. And the more we hear about it, the more we can marinate in that energy and understand that we are courageous. So let's hear what you've got to say.
So I love it. And before I jump into it, I do want to just preface, I'm sure you're familiar with Brene Brown's work on vulnerability.
Yes, I usually mention her, but today I didn't.
Yes.
You had to.
For you. So I'm actually fairly new to her work. I really only the last, I would say, 4 or 5 months maybe actually been introduced to her and what she's doing. So I do feel that it's important to say, and if you're already talking about it on the podcast, then I'm just going to reiterate it, that
please do.
That courage is not about just being brave. It's not about just like bootstrapping it and be like, okay, I can do this. You know, when we think courage, I know for me, I see like the gladiator person that doesn't seem to be afraid of anything. They just run into the fray totally ready to do it. But courage actually requires an immense amount of vulnerability, which is terrifying, which is why it's courage. Yeah. It's more than just like being brave and running into it. So my story is actually related to this second business, this passion project that I am bringing forward, which is, I mentioned before, focused on showing other service-based entrepreneurs how to launch and grow a profitable business. And the project is a huge passion project for me because growing my own design business is a lot of work, and it's tough in ways that I hadn't anticipated. So the idea literally dropped into my mind out of the ether for this new project, and I've been following on that universal guidance that this is needed, that the people need what I'm about to put out, which is both exciting and terrifying. So in May, I had my first launch. I had never done a launch before. This was a live launch. I had webinars prepared. I'd never done a webinar before. Like, there was so much. I was building a new website. I was building, registration pages, and I was building freebies and Facebook ads, and there's so much. And the whole way through, I was like, okay, this is going to be a success. It's going to be awesome. And yet in the back of my mind, and the closer the launch got, the louder the voice got of, what if it doesn't work? Mm-hmm. What if we come out at the end and we've just spent thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours of time and it doesn't work? And I headed into the launch with like, nope, it's going to be okay. I'm determined. I've done everything right. And I've done it like the way it should be. And it was a huge flop. Mm. And I was halfway through the launch and like in absolute shambles of like, oh my gosh, nobody, like, I think I had 3 people register. I'd spent hundreds of dollars on Facebook ads that weren't converting. I was in for so much time for all the work that I had done ahead of time. And I'm like, I am now looking my worst fear in the eye, where I'm going to come out of this launch and not make anything and not recoup any of the money that I put into it. So that took me a while actually to recover from, and all the way through, it was right around that time that I had become aware of Brene Brown's work. It was like, yes, understanding vulnerability. And I'm like, oh, Brene, I'm understanding vulnerability right now in a way that I never knew that I would need to understand what it would look like. So that was a huge swing for me. I'm really quite an introverted person, and the harder things are, the more I will draw into myself, the more that I want to just not engage in the world. So to be in a live launch where I'm still, focused on being out there and engaging with people and drawing people in, and at the same time wrestling with this intense, like, face-to-face, this is not going the way that I want it to, was really terrifying. So I've survived, obviously. I'm on the other end. I'm still here to live and talk about it. But yeah, that was, I've had many rumbles in the past, and I could come up with hundreds of examples of rumbles in the past from business and from personal. But this is one that was such a unique experience that it required everything from me. And at the end, I had to find a way to look at it and say, even though, from a business standpoint, it's a complete failure, I learned a ton. Yeah. Come out of it okay. and that doesn't mean the end. It doesn't mean because it didn't work this time that it's not going to work next time, or that it, you know, even if it doesn't work next time, that it wouldn't work the next time, that it might take a few goes. And I had to really give grace to myself to say, you know what, I learned, and I didn't know any of this going in. And it's important that I recognize that. And that I recognize that even as scary as it was, I came through it.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can come through that, and I can, you know, I can look at so many other experiences that I've come through in my life, that I can continue to walk forward. And it doesn't mean that's the end of me. It doesn't mean that's the end of the idea or the passion or the excitement. It just means this one time didn't work the way I wanted it to. And now it's, you know, what does it look like now going forward?
I can totally relate to your story for sure. I've done webinars where it's just been me talking, and by the end I'm like, whew, thank goodness I love talking about what I love talking about. I'm still happy, but no one was there.
I actually walked out of, I think it was my third one. I don't remember. It was one of the webinars I walked out where there was, again, nobody. And my boyfriend was sitting in the living room being very quiet because I was on the webinar. And I came out and I just said, you know what? I feel like I could talk in front of 1 million people right now and it wouldn't faze me, because I can't imagine anything being harder than generating excitement and passion to a room of nobody. In front of 1 million people, there's got to be at least somebody who would engage with me. Whereas here, I'm just talking to myself.
Yeah. And you know what's, for me, what I've had that's even worse is when one person shows up, it's particularly in a live setting, or when they know that they're the only person there, because then I have felt like, oh my gosh, now you see what a loser I am.
Yes.
At least if no one's there, it's a secret.
Yeah.
I could not generate more than one person out of the billions in the world. I don't know what's wrong with me.
Everybody that's on the internet, only one person could show up today.
Yeah. And at the time, it was devastating. I can laugh about it now, which is so good. But I totally feel, well, for me, the emotions that go along with those kinds of things are like shame and embarrassment and the pain of rejection. Like, I know no one's actually rejecting me, but I feel rejected. And so it does take a lot of courage to feel those emotions, to go into them rather than suppress them, which is one of the things that I work on a lot with clients in Courageous Self-Care. And then the other thing, like you said, is to get up and do it again. And there's a great scene in a movie with Reese Witherspoon that we just watched recently again. You know, something about, how do you know? I don't know. It's with, Reese Witherspoon. And there's a scene where she plays, she's a Olympic baseball player. And there's a scene where she gets up over and over and over and over. I'm pretty sure it's that movie, throughout her baseball career. And I just thought, oh, I am using that scene to motivate myself the next time I feel like I've been knocked down and I just need to keep on getting up.
The thing that I find so interesting, and I love that you gave that example. I haven't actually seen the movie, but I totally understand what the example is. What I, so often, I know I do this, and I think most of us do this, we have this vision in our mind of someone who's like going through a physical challenge. In my mind, it's always a boxer. So I studied Muay Thai for years, so I understand what that is. And by the way, I hate taking a punch, which is why I never went competitive, because I'm like, I don't want to get punched. But when I see that, so for me, at least, it seems so much easier to overcome a physical thing like
yes.
that. Because it's just physical. It's just happening to my body. Maybe that day I'm not feeling that great, or I just got nailed with my period, or, you know, I ate something weird. Or the weather's weird, you know, and yet I find when it's internal. So the biggest thing that came up for me in the launch was enormous self-doubt. Mm-hmm. This just enormous fear that what I was putting together really wasn't needed, that nobody really wants to have it. And who am I to bring this out? Mm-hmm. And wrestling with that, I would take a punch to the face every day of the week, much rather than like have to wrestle with that over and over and over again. And yet that's what it called out of me. That's what it said. You need to, this is the thing you need to work on. And this is what if you're ready to grow this, we're going to go through this over and over and over again.
Yeah, those big things come up in these big things that we create for ourselves. I like the phrase, they get revealed to be healed. So they only show up when we're ready to actually heal them. So that tremendous self-doubt that was probably there all along, but just a little niggling thing, when it comes up and blows up in your face, you're right. It's so much easier to deal with physical stuff, which is why we tend to focus on self-care as being physical to the body, because it is way more uncomfortable to go through like an existential crisis. Yeah, it's painful. And that's why it's important to learn specific strategies to go through those rather than just try to navigate our way through them by ourselves.
Yes. And I think that, so a physical wound or a physical challenge is people will admire you for going through it, and they know how to talk about it. If you break your leg, you can have a conversation about it with someone, but when you're going through the muck of it personally, it's a challenge to have a conversation with someone about that, and to be open enough to say, look, right now my life is really in shambles. I'm taking everything down to the studs and trying to dig it out. And to have that conversation with someone without them freaking out, running away is a challenge. Because I think unless you've gone through it on your own, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, Christina, where you've had conversations with someone who hasn't been willing to go through it.
Yeah.
They're usually the ones who aren't willing to have a conversation about it. And people who have at least dared to look it in the eye, even if they haven't worked through it all the way, but they've gone, oh, there's something here and I see it.
Yeah.
Then you can have a conversation around it. And then all of a sudden you can grow and learn through it.
Totally. Yeah. It's important to I'm really picky with who I choose to spend my time with and who I choose to share myself with, those really painful parts. So yeah, you're right. And that's why it's so important to have a mentor, like someone who's been through the stuff that you've been through, that has some strategies and can relate to it. I just feel it's super important to have someone that you can look up to and to share these kinds of things with, because it's not fair to even dump it on your significant other or your friends. And like you said, they either won't want to deal with it or they just don't know how. Yeah. Super important. Oh my gosh, I could just talk about this all day, but in the interest of time, we can talk later.
Extended cuts.
That's right. In the interest of time, let's move on to how people can get in touch with you. I know that they feel you're passionate about interior design, and there are all sorts of entrepreneurs out there who would love to know how to build a business. So how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. So there's a couple ways that you can. If you're wanting to see more on the interior design side, then I would invite you to go to the website, DutchTouchInteriors.com, and you'll find my blog and you can connect with me through there. If you are looking for practical strategies and tools and advice to grow a business, whatever, and my focus is always service-based because that's what I understand. I do touch a little bit on product-based, but that's not my experience. I have a podcast called Dare to Begin Small and Mighty.
Nice.
So I have, there's an episode that comes out every week. You can find that either online by going to daretobegin.net, or you can find it on Spotify or iTunes by just searching for Dare to Begin Small and Mighty. And you can connect with me through the podcast or through Instagram as well at I Dare to Begin, which will give you a connection with me, to a connection point. And then I wanted to offer to your listeners as well. So I know that starting a business is scary and terrifying and hard and requires everything you've got and then some. So I have 2 programs that I wanted to offer a coupon code to your listeners, because I think, first of all, I know that it requires a lot in terms of financial investment. My launch in May is a perfect example of that, like giving it everything you got. So if you're in the process of launching a business and you want to have a step-by-step program that is practical, it is like tools on the ground of how you can actually build your business, start it up from like, I have an idea to how do I make money. If you go to daretobegin.net/launch, and then use the coupon code LAUNCH, so LAUNCH. It will, I've given your listeners actually an $800 discount on the program because I wanted to really meet them where they're at. So you can use that coupon code there. If you're already in a business and you want to boost your profits, so my business is all about client-centric. When we talked about interior design before, it's all about the client. But I've had to learn and grow a system that is not just about the client satisfaction, but also about growing the profits in your business, because the end of the day, our businesses are here to make money. Then if you go to daretobegin.net/profit and you use the coupon code PROFIT, you'll save a bundle on it's called the Profit Power Pack, which is all about boosting your bottom line. So.
Awesome. That is so generous. Thank you. And so listeners, take advantage of this. If you're feeling some sort of energetic tension, like, ooh, maybe I don't know, go check it out. Take some embodied action, type in or go to the show notes from this podcast and click on the links that will be there to check it out. Get to know Amy by visiting her website, listen to her podcast, and if there is something there for you, then definitely take action and use those coupons, because this is an amazing gift. Thanks so much, Amy.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, and so that is going to bring us to the end of this episode. Amy, thank you so much for being here and sharing vulnerably and authentically about your story of courage and your self-care practice. Just so many golden nuggets in what you shared.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And listeners from wherever you are listening in the world, thank you so much for giving yourself the gift of time to listen to this episode. I invite you to come back and listen again. I'm shifting into one episode a week. And so there is always so much goodness, whether it's an interview or a teaching episode of specifically what courageous self-care entails. I've always given you action steps on how to bring the esoteric into the everyday practical. So I invite you to come back. Thank you so much for being here, Amy. Thank you again for listening, and I look forward to connecting with you again next time. Bye-bye for now.